朋友们好啊，下面这位美国女生说，从小就被西方媒体灌输关于中国的谎言，但是当她来到中国之后就很快的意识到自己错了。她专门做了一期视频向中国道歉，并且一条条的戳穿西方媒体的谎言。咱们来看视频。
So today, I realized something really big, and I wanted to share it with you. I've gotten to speak with many Chinese people. In fact, I think I've talked to at least 1,000 Chinese people. Short conversations, some really long friendships that I think are going to last my entire life, and everything in between. These conversations have led me to realize something very interesting to me. And that is just how wrong I was about Chinese culture. So my media always told me things about China that I quickly realized were wrong. For example, they always said that Chinese children were in factories forced to do labor. Actually, your children are students studying. I was also told that in China, large cities were all fake. And so they were empty cities just built to look impressive. I realize now that that's North Korea, that's not China, but they totally made it sound like that was a huge thing in China. Another misconception I had about China, and that was a really big one. And I want to start by saying that I know that I was wrong. And I know that it only says something about me and how little I knew and how little I knew about the world. But my biggest sorry, I'm a little worried to say this. My biggest misunderstanding about China is that you guys were just like Japan in culture. Let me explain. So Japan gets a lot more international coverage in the US. We know a ton about Japanese culture. And also, I lived in Japan for a while. And so I learned all sorts of crazy things about their culture that felt so different than mine. But then recently, Korea has become popular. And whenever I watch a Korean drama or I learn something about Korea, it feels similar to Japan. It's still very misogynistic, for example, very focused on looks, it almost feels kind of retro in a way. Like the things that their society is focused on feel different than ours. For example, I think that there's a lot of anxiety around appearance there, and there's a lot of anxiety about to get married or not to get married, mostly because a woman has to be worried, well, what will her husband do if she marries him? Will he force her not to work and force her just to be a housewife? I think those are valid worries in Japan and Korea. And the men that I talked to there, just normal men, they usually had those opinions also. So it felt very normal there. And so when I experienced Japan, I learned all sorts of things about that culture that I didn't like. And then when I learned about Korea, they had the same things that I didn't like. And so naturally, I thought that China was the same. And I couldn't be more wrong. I would say that the Chinese men that I have talked to are incredibly open-minded and supportive. They're not misogynistic. And it's crazy. Just like when I'm talking to people from China, I often think, wow, this is the same opinion that Americans have. Wow, we're so similar. That's also how an American thinks about this topic. It's actually quite similar. But I'm amazed at how progressive China is and how when I'm talking to Chinese people, it often feels like I'm talking to an American. The culture is different, yes, And there are some key factors that are incredibly different. Feels very American in their opinions and the way that they think about things. And so that's been my biggest shock so far. My biggest culture shock about China is that you guys are not like Japan. You guys are not like Korea. It's very different. And honestly, I think I like it a lot more. I am going to continue learning about China. This is my opinion currently, is that I think China is very progressive. In some ways, China feels more progressive than the US. In other ways, less so. It's a balance. I am sorry that I thought China was just like Japan. I was stupid. I was wrong. And I understand it much better now. And I really love learning about China so far. So thank you guys so much for sharing about your culture.
西方世界，尤其是美国，关于中国的报道常年来就充斥着偏见、误解与刻意的妖魔化。从血汗工厂到鬼楼空城，从压迫制度到文化洗脑，一个接一个的标签轻率地贴在了中国人民的头上，仿佛我们真的生活在一个灰暗、冷酷、没有希望的世界。然而，当一个美国人亲自来到中国，和成千上万的中国人对话之后，他才发现一个真相：中国根本不是那样。这位美国女生说，她最大的误解是以为中国像日本和韩国一样。这一句看似普通的话，却戳中了一个关键点。西方人常常将整个东亚视为一体，把中国文化、日本文化、韩国文化混为一谈，甚至用自己脑补出来的刻板印象去批判我们。而当他们真正的接触到中国之后，最让他们震撼的是中国有多么的不一样，而是美国竟和中国有那么多相似的地方。中国人思考问题的方式、性别平等对待的态度、对教育的重视、对他人的尊重的普遍程度，深深地打动了这位美国女生。这就是中国人民的真实写照。我们的城市不是空壳白色，而是生机勃勃、灯火通明。我们的孩子不是童工奴役，而是寒窗苦读、自强不息。我们的男人不是大男子主义，而是尊重女性、渴望平等的时代公民。这才是真实的中国，这才是我们数亿人民有辛勤与智慧共同建设的现代化的中国。我们不能不感慨，其实这样的认知反转不应该姗姗来迟。如果世界愿意多一些真诚，少一些偏见，中国的形象本可以更早的真实立体。然而偏偏在一个误解和攻击中，我们中国人被迫低头苦干，默默忍耐。不是我们不想发声，而是以前太多的话语权被垄断，太多的话语被曲解。但是今天我们看到了希望，当一个个的外国人终于敢于站出来，说出自己对中国真实的感受，不被操控，不怕异议，他们无意中做了一件极为有意义的事情。他们撕开了西方信息封锁的缝隙，让更多的人看到了中国真实的模样。他们的每一句话都是对西方偏见的一次攻击，也是对中国人民的深情致敬。这位美国女生还说，中国在很多地方比美国更加的先进。这句话虽然是出自一个普通的外国人之口，却比无数的官样文章更加的有力量，因为这是来自一个曾经误解我们的人，来自一个亲眼见证中国的转变者，他的情感真挚，话语平实，却足以动摇那些根深蒂固的谎言。所以今天我们不仅要为这位朋友的觉醒点赞，更要为我们自己感到骄傲。我们没有靠战争，没有靠殖民，没有靠欺骗赢得尊重，我们靠的是自己的文明、善良、理性与进步，赢得了他人的认同。中国不需要让世界跪求理解，而是以自己的姿态、自己的行动，让世界无法忽视我们的存在。好，今天的视频就到这里。